Sometimes the hardest thing to do is the simplest, just breathe. Noah Pierce was 34 years old and, on paper, had everything figured out. He worked as a data analyst at a tech startup in Seattle, lived in a modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, and had a girlfriend who loved him despite his chronic unavailability. On LinkedIn, his profile looked like a success story: problem solver, reliable team player, always available. In real life, he spent most of his days with a constant weight pressing against his chest, as if he were climbing an invisible staircase that never reached anywhere. For years, Noah had lived with episodes of shortness of breath, tightness in his throat, tingling hands. He'd been to hospitals, undergone cardiac exams, respiratory tests, sleep monitoring. Every report repeated the same phrase: physically, you're fine. He would leave the consultations with the same question hammering in his mind: if everything is fine, why does it feel like I can never breathe properly? Noah had grown up in a small town in rural Oregon, in a house where talking about feelings was never an option. His father, a truck driver, had suffered a heart attack when Noah was 9. He survived, but the family entered a state of permanent alert. His mother, exhausted and worried, began repeating to her eldest son, "You're my strong boy. You can't fall apart." Without realizing it, she had pushed onto him a role no child should have: to remain calm, functional, and mature while the adults around him collapsed. Back then, Noah discovered that if he held his breath, he could stop himself from crying. His body learned that quickly and never unlearned it. Now, at 34, he lived alone, surrounded by screens and notifications, avoiding any pause at all costs. He slept with podcasts playing so he wouldn't hear his own thoughts. He had a girlfriend, Elise, who had tried to talk about therapy, but always received the same answer: "I don't have time for that." He didn't drink excessively, didn't use drugs, went to the gym a few times a week. Everything seemed under control, except for the fact that at random moments, in the coffee line, in traffic, during a Zoom meeting, the world would start to shrink and the air simply wouldn't come in. The catalyst of the story happened on an ordinary Monday morning. Noah was on the bus heading to work, earbuds in, checking emails on his phone, when 3 notifications arrived simultaneously. His boss demanding a delivery, his sister warning that recent tests on their father showed something strange, and a message from Elise complaining that he'd canceled yet another dinner. The bus entered a tunnel, the signal flickered, the lights seemed to dim. Suddenly, Noah's chest locked. He stood up, trying to pull in air, but his breathing came short and choppy. His hands trembled, cold sweat ran down his back, his vision blurred. Convinced he was having a heart attack, he got off at the next stop and collapsed on the ground in a recessed area, leaning against a concrete wall. Paramedics were called. At the hospital, after an electrocardiogram, X-ray, and monitoring, the attending physician, calm, said the phrase he hated most: "Your heart is fine." "This looks like a panic attack." Noah reacted defensively, irritated. "But I don't have time to be in panic. I just need to be able to breathe." Before releasing him, the doctor handed him a simple card for an 8-week program at a neighborhood health center, a stress and anxiety management group that combined psychoeducation, breathing exercises, and practices of pause. Noah almost threw the card in the trash, but stuffed it in his pocket. Days later, at home, another night of insomnia and chest tightness made him look at that small rectangle again. He signed up, more out of fear of dying than desire to change. In the group, Noah met Dr. Helena Ortiz, a psychologist in her 60s, Puerto Rican, with a firm voice and an extremely attentive gaze. She didn't talk about healing your life or make magical promises. She spoke about how the body learns patterns and how anxiety is often breath trapped in old stories that no one helped name. The program's proposal wasn't to dig up traumas right away, but to introduce something Noah didn't know how to do: short inner pauses, 30 seconds long, in the middle of the day. At first, he found it all irritating. The first sessions asked participants to close their eyes for 1 minute and simply observe their breathing. Noah could barely make it halfway through. The sensation of suffocation worsened when he paid attention to his own body. He felt like a lost cause. But for the first time, someone took his experience seriously without dismissively saying, "It's all in your head." Helena didn't argue with Noah's rational mind. She spoke to his body with simple phrases. "You don't need to fix anything right now. Just notice. Notice where the air stops." Noah resisted. He showed up to sessions but remained skeptical, arms crossed, checking his phone between exercises. When Helena asked participants to share what they noticed during breathing practices, he would shrug and say, "Nothing much. Just felt weird." But something was shifting, even if he couldn't name it yet. The idea that he didn't have to fix himself immediately, that simply noticing was enough, felt both foreign and strangely comforting. Still, doubt gnawed at him. One evening, he almost quit the program. He told Elise, "I don't think this breathing stuff is for me. I need something that actually works." She looked at him quietly and said, "What if this is working and you're just too scared to feel it?" The question stayed with him. The next morning, instead of canceling, he showed up to the session 10 minutes early. Over the following weeks, Noah began to notice a pattern. The tightness in his chest appeared whenever someone needed him. An urgent email, a message from his sister about their father, a tearful call from his mother, an extra request from his boss. The anxiety came less from bad things happening and more from the sensation that he could never let his guard down. Helena challenged him. "When was the first time you felt you couldn't breathe because someone needed you to be strong?" He answered evasively, "I guess I've always been like this." But the question lingered, like a pebble in his shoe. Noah tried to dismiss it, tried to logic his way out of it, but it kept returning at odd moments. While brushing his teeth, waiting for coffee, staring at his computer screen during a meeting. His body seemed to be asking the question even when his mind refused to. One night, unable to sleep, Noah found himself scrolling through old photos on his phone. He stumbled upon a picture from his 9th birthday, just weeks before his father's heart attack. In the photo, he was smiling, holding a soccer ball, his chest open and relaxed. He stared at the image for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to breathe that easily. He couldn't. The journey wasn't geographic, but it was a crossing nonetheless. Noah was moving from a life of constant motion and distraction into a space of uncomfortable stillness. Every session with Helena felt like stepping further into unknown territory. The practices seemed simple. Breathe in for 4 counts, out for 6. Place a hand on your chest and notice the rise and fall. But they demanded something from him that felt almost impossible: permission to stop performing. During one session, Helena introduced a new exercise: sitting in silence for 5 full minutes, no guidance, no music, no instructions except to be present. Noah lasted 90 seconds before his legs started bouncing, his fingers drumming on his thigh. When Helena gently asked what he noticed, he snapped, "I noticed I hate sitting still." She nodded slowly. "What are you afraid will happen if you do?" He didn't have an answer, but the question opened a door. The emotional climax happened during a special Saturday morning session held in a borrowed public school gymnasium. Helena proposed a different exercise. She drew a long line on the floor with masking tape, marking ages in 5-year increments: 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. She asked each person to walk slowly along the line, stopping at each number, taking 3 breaths, and asking, "How did my chest feel at this age in my life?" Noah found the idea strange, almost childish, but he entered into it. At 25, he remembered his first job in Seattle, the pride and the fear of being fired. At 20, he remembered college, studying too much and never going to parties. When he reached the number 10, something changed. He placed his foot on the mark on the floor, tried to pull in air, and his body simply froze. A smell of hospital disinfectant, a distant siren in his memory, the image of his father pale on a stretcher, his mother trembling, saying, "You need to be strong. Noah, don't cry now." All of it came back in seconds, as if time had knotted itself. In the silent gymnasium, he felt exactly the same tightness he had felt that night in his childhood. Only now, there were people around who weren't demanding that he be strong. Helena approached slowly, and instead of asking what happened, she asked, "What is that 10-year-old Noah holding in his chest?" It was the breaking point. Noah, who for decades had stylized his own emotions into logical phrases, finally broke down in open, almost uncontrolled crying. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't Instagram-worthy. He bent forward, braced his hands on his knees, choked. Between sobs, he managed to say, "I thought if I breathed deeply, I would start crying and never be able to stop, so I stopped breathing." This was the moment when the story's title materialized. He looked back for the first time, not as someone revisiting the past to feed guilt, but as someone finally seeing the child he had been, crushed by responsibilities that didn't fit in a boy's chest. He realized that his difficulty breathing had never been weakness or just modern anxiety. It was an old survival strategy that no one had ever revisited with him. Helena knelt beside him, her hand hovering near his shoulder but not touching, giving him space. When his breathing finally steadied, she spoke quietly. "That boy learned to protect everyone by disappearing, and he's been doing it for 24 years. Noah wiped his face with his sleeve, nodded. For the first time, he didn't try to explain it away or rationalize it. He just let it be true. From that climax, the transformation wasn't immediate, but it became possible. Helena proposed a simple symbolic method. Every time Noah noticed he was holding his breath, instead of blaming himself, he should imagine he was holding the shoulder of that 10-year-old boy and say internally, "I'm here with you now. We can breathe together." That image became the central symbol of the story, not a physical object, but an internal posture of stepping back in time to include his own past, instead of running from it. At first, the practice felt awkward, almost embarrassing. Noah would catch himself holding his breath during a tense email exchange, close his eyes, and try to visualize the boy. Sometimes the image came clearly. Other times, it felt like grasping at smoke. But he kept trying. The breakthrough came during a particularly stressful week at work. A major project was falling apart. His boss was furious, and Noah felt the familiar tightness beginning to spiral. He excused himself to the bathroom, locked himself in a stall, and whispered aloud, "We can breathe together." The shift was subtle but unmistakable. The panic didn't vanish, but it loosened its grip. He took 3 slow breaths, each one deeper than the last, and when he returned to his desk, he did something radical. He sent an email asking for help. "I can't finish this alone by Friday. Can we redistribute some tasks?" The sky didn't fall. His boss agreed, and Noah felt something he hadn't felt in years: relief. Small changes began appearing in his routine. Noah negotiated with his boss to redistribute tasks, admitting he couldn't take on all projects at once. He called his sister and, for the first time, said, "I'm also scared about what might happen to Dad." Instead of being the emotional filter for the family, he placed himself beside them. With Elise, he started talking about the crisis on the bus, about the terror he felt of disappointing everyone. In a special scene, they were lying in bed, and he realized that for the first time, he could inhale deeply without feeling the immediate urge to get up and solve something. One evening, Elise asked him, "Do you feel different?" He thought about it. "I don't know if I feel different, but I think I feel present, like I'm actually here." She smiled, took his hand. "That's everything." The revelation wasn't a single lightning bolt, but a gradual dawning. Noah began to understand that his anxiety wasn't a malfunction. It was a message. His body had been trying to tell him for 24 years that he was still holding the breath of a terrified 9-year-old boy who believed that if he let go, everything would collapse. The tightness in his chest wasn't the enemy. It was a guardian, trying to keep him safe using the only strategy it knew. During one of the final group sessions, Helena asked each participant to write a letter to a younger version of themselves. Noah sat with his pen hovering over the blank page for 15 minutes. Finally, he wrote, "Dear Noah, at 10 years old, you did your best. You saved yourself the only way you knew how. But you don't have to hold your breath anymore. I'm here now, and I'm strong enough for both of us. You can rest. Love, Noah at 34. Reading it aloud to the group, his voice cracked, but he didn't stop. When he finished, the room was silent except for the sound of someone quietly crying, not out of sadness, but recognition. Helena met his eyes across the circle and nodded once, slowly. No words were needed. The principle revealed was simple but profound. You cannot breathe in the present if you're still holding the breath of the past. Healing wasn't about erasing the past or even about forgiving it. It was about finally giving that younger self permission to feel what he'd never been allowed to feel. Only then could the adult Noah breathe freely. In the ending, several months later, Noah returned alone to his hometown. His father was stable but more fragile, and the childhood home was being put up for sale. He entered the living room where, one day, he had watched his father being carried away by ambulance. The space was almost empty, just the echo of footsteps. The memory came on strong, but this time, he didn't fight to push the sensation away. He walked to the middle of the room, closed his eyes, and did exactly what he had avoided his entire life. He stopped. He didn't do anything, didn't reach for his phone, didn't explain to anyone. He just stood there, breathing. The emotional camera of the story focused on this minimal gesture, an adult man, in silence, giving himself a pause he never had at 10 years old. He felt his chest fill and empty, slowly. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and whispered, almost like a secular prayer, not to a distant God, but to the boy he had been. You didn't need to save anyone, and neither do I. There was no loud music, no supernatural revelations. No one entered the room to give a final speech. It was just Noah, his breath, and the awareness that for the first time, he had looked back without getting lost there. When he left the house and closed the door, the weight in his chest still existed in some moments, but now he knew he wasn't alone inside it. Back in Seattle, the story ended in an everyday scene. Noah on the bus, stuck in traffic, notifications flashing on his phone. He felt his breathing begin to shorten. Instead of forcing himself to respond to everything, he put the phone in his pocket, rested his head against the window, and observed the bus's interior rearview mirror. He saw the corridor full of people, each with their own invisible weights. He inhaled deeply, counting to 4, exhaled counting to 6. The anxiety didn't disappear like magic, but it didn't dominate him. The inner pause had become a place he could return to whenever he chose. The bus moved forward. So did Noah. Not healed in some perfect, permanent way, but healing, breath by breath, pause by pause, moment by moment. And for the first time in 24 years, that was enough. This story reminds us that sometimes our bodies remember what our minds tried to forget. For 24 years, Noah held his breath because a scared child learned that breathing meant feeling, and feeling meant falling apart. But healing began the moment he turned back, not to change the past, but to finally give that boy permission to breathe. What breath are you still holding from a moment that's already gone? If this story touched something deep within you, write the word breathe in the comments. Let me know you stayed until the end and this message found you. Share what city you're watching from. Your presence here might inspire someone else on their journey. Subscribe and hit the bell because every week I share stories that can transform how you see yourself and your struggles. Click the card on screen for another powerful story of transformation. And remember, the pause you've been looking for might be just one conscious breath away.